Stop acting like you own me. You don't get to tell me where I go or who I'm with." The room didn't fall silent. It did the opposite. It filled with small, mean laughter. Clinks of cutlery paused just long enough for a chorus of snickers to slide in, the kind people use when they're relieved it isn't them on the spot. The lights were soft, the wine was expensive, the city glittered beyond the wraparound windows, and Adam was putting on a show. Binta didn't flinch. She set her glass down, slow and even, like she had all the time in the world. "You're right," she said, voice calm enough to make a few people turn. "We're not together anymore." The laughter snagged, then died. Someone coughed. Adam blinked once, then twice, like he'd heard wrong. He waited for the softening, for the backpedal, for the salvaging line every couple uses when a joke goes too far. Binta just smiled, warm, composed, and careful the way you are when you finally decide to stop arguing with a storm. She stood, nodded to the host, and thanked the table for the evening. No rush, no drama, no clatter. She didn't throw a napkin or a drink. She just left. The elevator doors closed on her reflection, dark skin luminous under chandelier light, spine straight, eyes steady, and carried her down to the lobby where the city air met her like an old friend. Outside, the night was clean and bright. She walked to the car, slid in, and let the driver pull them into the river of headlights. She watched the skyline and counted her breaths. 4 in, 6 out. When the phone buzzed, she turned it face down. Not tonight, not anymore. At the penthouse, glass and steel and sky, she paused at the door she had unlocked 1,000 times, then stepped in. The place answered with quiet. It always had. The quiet of work done properly, of things maintained, of decisions that had cost her and paid her back. She didn't pack. There was nothing she needed to take because there was nothing she had to leave. In the morning, Adam's key didn't work. You could hear it in the hallway, the metallic scrape, the stubborn shove, the little huff of disbelief. He tried again. Nothing. He muttered something. Then the knock, 3 knocks, harder each time, bounced off the corridor. Darnell opened his door across the way. He was in a navy robe and the kind of slippers only humans and cartoon characters wear. He had a gentle face and the look of a man who'd been alive long enough to know when not to be surprised. "Morning, Mr. Marshall," he said, voice even. "You'll be wanting this." He held out a thick cream envelope sealed with a modest, unassuming strip of tape. Adam stared. "What is this?" "A kindness," Darnell said, "and a boundary." His too, for that. "The locks? Did she?" "Arranged lawfully," Darnell replied, and the calm in the words was not an accident. "There's a property manager listed inside, a schedule for retrieving belongings. 2 escorts from the building security will help you. No one's here to humiliate you, sir. Just to make sure nobody escalates." Adam didn't take the envelope. He almost laughed, the way people do when they want the world to give them back the moment before it changed. "She can't just—" "You'll want to read it," Darnell said. His voice softened. "I'm your neighbor, not your adversary. It's all very clear." Inside the penthouse, behind glass as tall as a cathedral, the city stretched for miles. Binta stood with a mug of tea that had long since gone cold. She wasn't listening at the door. She wasn't gloating. She was breathing. The phone on the kitchen island lit up with a name. Josephine Okafor. Binta swiped to answer. "Good morning, Josephine." "Good morning, Binta," the lawyer said, brisk but not unkind. "All filings are confirmed. The notice of exclusive possession is on record. Property management has the schedule. Security briefed. I've included language to keep third-party contractors from being dragged in. People deserve to work without becoming collateral." "Thank you." Binta leaned on the island, fingertips on the stone. "And the envelope?" "With Darnell," Josephine said. "He volunteered." He said, quote, "I have the kind of face people don't want to fight with before 9 a.m. I did not disagree. Binta smiled for the first time. "He does." "And Binta," Josephine paused, "you don't need me to say this, but I'm going to. You did everything slowly, carefully, and cleanly. We are not improvising. We are executing." "I know." Binta looked toward the hallway, where the framed photo of her mother, Adana, caught a slice of morning light. "We are not improvising." Down the hall, Adam finally took the envelope. He tore the top, pulled out a neat stack, a cover letter on Josephine's letterhead, the deed to the penthouse, 7 years old, the wire confirmation from a private bank, a contemporaneous memo that read like a timestamp on a life, $50 million transferred, funds sourced from the sale of family assets, title vested solely in Binta Gold. There was a schedule for collection of personal items, a list of what would be considered jointly purchased furnishings, most of which the building had provided, and a line that slowed him down more than the numbers. This home was never collateral for any Marshall Development Corporation obligation. Adam's mouth went dry. "This is ridiculous," he said aloud to no one in particular. "This is ridiculous." "It's very thorough," Darnell said gently. "You knew?" Adam snapped. "I knew she had a lawyer who doted on footnotes," Darnell said, "and I knew you'd both be relieved not to shout in a hallway." On the island, Binta's phone chimed again. Josephine had sent a second document set, a different animal entirely. Adana Ventures, the quiet investment vehicle Binta had built, named for the woman who taught her to read everything twice, had finalized a position over the last 2 years, 40%. Not a whisper of celebrity investors, no splashy announcements, just patient capital, clean contracts, tight covenants. 40% of Marshall Development Corporation, the company Adam had steered with charisma and press releases, while Binta collected board packets and audited footnotes like they were a new language. "Do we need to call them?" Binta asked. "We already did," Josephine said. "Directors know. Council knows. Bank knows. We had the courtesy call at 7:30. No surprises, only documents." "Thank you." Binta's voice stayed even, but her hands warmed on the mug. "And Adam?" "Legally noticed on both matters," Josephine replied. "Home and corporate. We control access to the premises. We control the timing at MDC calmly. This is not about humiliation. It is about moving forward. It is not now. Heaven 40 hind." Binta didn't say amen, but she could have. Her mother would have. Adana believed in prayer, in planning, and in not confusing one for the other. When Binta was 14 and a teacher laughed at her for reading the fine print on a field trip consent form, Adana had squeezed her hand and whispered, "Let them laugh. When firm ground looks like stubbornness to people who prefer mud, keep your feet where they are." The phone vibrated again, this time a text, from an unknown number that was not unknown at all. "Adam, open the door. We need to talk." She placed the phone face down. Not cruel. Just finished. Another buzz. "Adam, what is this stunt?" Binta, typing. "Please coordinate through Council for Belongings. You have the schedule. There will be 2 security staff to assist. No improvisations. Thank you." The 3 bubbles appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. She set the phone aside and walked the length of the windows, the city adjusting under her like a map you slowly refold. She didn't replay the dinner. She didn't rewrite the lines. She thought instead of how long you can hold your breath in a marriage if you keep telling yourself it's a swim and not a sink. She thought of the weeks when she stopped recognizing her own jokes because she'd learned to ration joy to make sure no one mistook it for control. She thought of how silence can be kindness when you are preserving oxygen for both people, and how sometimes the kindest thing left is to surface and stop sharing a tank. Her phone rang again, and she let it. The voicemail would do its job. When she finally exhaled, she did it the way she had breathed the night before, on purpose. By mid-morning, Josephine was at the kitchen table with a laptop and coffee, her hair coiled into a decisive bun. "He'll try to frame this as rash," she said, because a season of planning always looks like a rash day to the person who wasn't watching. Binta nodded. "He'll also be embarrassed." "He's human," Josephine said, "but our task is not to manage his embarrassment. Our task is to keep this clean." "Then let's keep it clean." Josephine rotated the laptop and showed Binta a simple dashboard. Custody of keys, build-in, pass list, updated, delivery slots, assigned, and a neat timeline for the corporate sideboard notifications, bank calls, filings queued to go public in the afternoon. There was a statement drafted in neutral language should the press dig. Adana Ventures confirms an increased equity position in Marshall Development Corporation. We look forward to supporting governance improvements and community-forward development initiatives. It did not mention spouses. It did not mention gossip. It did not mention dinner parties, or laughter, or the way a room shifts when it doesn't know where to look. "Do we publish today?" Binta asked. "Not yet," Josephine said. "We'll let the board breathe. We'll let him breathe. Then we'll publish what must be public, and we will not add adjectives." Binta smiled. "Adjectives are very expensive. Especially the ones people drown in," Josephine said. Darnell knocked then, softer than before, and when Josephine opened the door, he lifted a grocery bag. "Fresh croissants," he said. "From the good place, the one with the lines. Seemed like a day for proper butter." Binta's shoulders loosened. "You're an angel." "No," Darnell said, genuine and dry. "I'm a man who knows breakfast can prevent litigation." They sat. They ate. They didn't rehash the past because they had documents for that. They talked about practical things, the schedule for movers, the list of items that were more sentimental than valuable. a leather notebook Adam loved, an old baseball cap, and the caution that sometimes sentiment is how people try to re-enter. "We'll be kind," Josephine said, "and we'll be clear." When the intercom buzzed just before noon, building security announced 2 officers and Adam's assistant. They were punctual, respectful, professional. They had a copy of the schedule and a rolling cart. Binta stayed in the kitchen. Josephine greeted them at the door. Darnell, across the hall again, kept his door open just enough to be a witness if one was needed, and to be furniture if calm required a place to sit. Adam didn't come up. He waited downstairs, where the marble gleamed and the doormen smiled the same way they smile at everyone, which is to say politely enough to soothe and not enough to lie. The assistant went through the list, filled 3 boxes, signed a sheet, and left without editorializing. Grief, humiliation, anger, none of it needed a speech on a Tuesday. When it was done, the apartment felt exactly the same size and a shade lighter. Binta stood in the center of the living room. She touched the back of the sofa. She looked up, then out. "What's next?" she asked. Josephine opened another folder. "Board call," she said. "Civil, professional. You will not speak to his tenure. You will not speak to his character. You will speak to outcomes, governance, and community. You will say the words we agreed to say. Housing that people can actually afford. Labor practices that honor workers. Transparency that is not a press release, but a ledger." "And the rest?" Binta asked. "The rest is what the rest always is," Josephine said. "Noise." Binta walked to the framed photo of her mother. She tilted it a degree, as if aligning it with the new horizon. "I named the fund for her," she said, almost to herself, "so I would remember the difference between a promise and a performance." "You do," Josephine said. "Now let the company remember it too." Binta nodded, checked the time, and sat. The world had not ended. The city had not noticed. But the center of gravity had shifted back into her bones. She was not performing control. She was practicing care. For a home she had bought without applause, for a company she intended to steer without spectacle, for a life she would not ration anymore just to make sure someone else didn't call it ownership. Her phone vibrated one more time with a last message from Adam. Not angry this time, but small. "Adam, you planned this." She looked at the screen until the words steadied. Then she replied, simply and truthfully, "Binta, I prepared." The board call started on time. No small talk, no toasts, no, "How's everyone doing?" Just a quiet grid of faces and the click of the recorder, and Binta saying, "Good afternoon. Thank you for making the time." "Is this really necessary?" one director asked. He had the polished tone of a man who collects limited edition fountain pens. "There's a process for ownership disclosures, and we've followed it," Josephine said, sitting just off camera at Binta's kitchen table. "Notified counsel, filed with the exchange, informed the bank agents. Today is not about surprises, it's about orientation." "Orientation to what?" another director asked. "A change in control?" "No," Binta said. "A change in priorities. I won't speak to personalities or the past. I will speak to outcomes. We're in development, so let's talk about what we actually build." They expected a speech about numbers. She gave them sentences about people that still fit on a spreadsheet. Housing people can actually afford, labor standards that don't treat compliance like a ceiling, clear ledgers the public can trust without needing a press release to translate. We'll honor every lawful commitment. We'll unwind what never should have been signed. And we'll do it without theater. Silence on the grid is a different kind of applause. It isn't loud, but it does mean people are listening. The CFO cleared his throat. From a financing perspective, the banks will want comfort. Any governance shifts, even without formal control changes, can trigger reviews. "Set the reviews," Binta said. "We keep clean books. We have nothing to fear." A director who had served the longest leaned closer. "Will Adam be joining this call?" "No," Josephine said. "He's been notified of all corporate actions. This is a board orientation." "Right," the long-serving director murmured. He glanced down, then back up. "Well, Miss Gold, I won't lie. This is unusual. I also won't lie about something else. The subcommittee on compliance has been asking for the very things you named for 2 years. If you're actually going to do them, you'll have my vote on every policy that moves us there." "Thank you," Binta said simply. They went point by point, without adjectives. Project pipeline, cash positions, labor disputes, environmental reviews, city council meetings on the horizon. Josephine kept an eye on the clock and on Binta's water glass. The call ended in 61 minutes, with 3 motions queued for next week and 1 sentence that made everything feel real. "We'll issue a neutral statement this afternoon," Binta said. No personalities, just facts. There wanna be tepid. The statement went out at 3:02 p.m. Adana Ventures confirms an increased equity position in Marshall Development Corporation. We look forward to supporting governance improvements and community-forward development initiatives. No adjectives, no names. Reporters called anyway. Binta declined, politely, the same way you decline a third dessert you can't afford just because someone insists it's on the house. While the city refreshed headlines, Adam drove to the MDC headquarters he had treated like a second living room. He swiped his badge at the turnstile, like muscle memory, and watched the reader blink red. He swiped again, same red. "Let me try a manual," the guard said. He was young and earnest and sweating in a jacket too big for spring. He typed something into a terminal and shook his head. "It says to see HR." "HR?" Adam repeated, as if he had never heard the letters put together. A woman in a slate-gray blazer met him a few minutes later. She was very calm. "Access is restricted pending governance review," she said. "We'll need your laptop and phone. You'll receive a pack at home with instructions." "This is my company," Adam said, the words falling out before he could adjust them. "It's a public company," she said softly, "and your pack will explain the rest." He laughed, a short, brittle sound. "Is everyone enjoying this?" "That's super send in the never widge to 40. Nobody enjoys this," she said. "That's not how grown-ups work." She walked him to the exit without touching his elbow, which somehow felt more merciful. Outside, spring was pretending to be summer, and the sidewalk carried him nowhere in particular. He turned his phone over in his hand, stared at his reflection in the black glass, then shoved it into a pocket that no longer held anything that mattered. Back at the penthouse, the day unfolded like a calm room. Josephine stood to leave. "Bored was better than it had to be," she said, tightening her bun. "They want to be better than they have been," Binta said. "There's a difference, and we'll hold them to it." Josephine slid a slim folder across the island. "One more thing. The master lease on the old HQ. Turns out it's owned by a private entity we can talk to." Binta raised an eyebrow. "Which private entity?" "An LLC that sits under a different branch of the family tree," Josephine said. "We're not doing revenge. We're doing housekeeping." "Housekeeping it is," Binta said. They had the conversation that needed to happen. This is not a siege. This is a reset. The property manager made a tidy offer. The lease wound down, not with cameras, but with a checklist. Meanwhile, the bank agents sent professionally phrased emails. "We note recent governance changes. As part of our routine risk review, we'd like to schedule a discussion." Josephine responded in paragraphs that could have been taught in school. At sunset, the penthouse went gold, and the city softened at the edges. Binta moved through the rooms Light had memorized. She didn't hunt ghosts. She put away cups. She watered the plant that never got enough attention. She studied a wall where she'd been meaning to hang a map of the city colored pins for sites that deserved something other than luxury glass. She took a sticky note, wrote reading room, west side, and stuck it at eye level. The first site came up 2 days later, a forgotten floor above a laundromat, sunlit and slightly stained, with rent cheap enough to feel like someone had blessed it. Binta met the landlord, an older woman who had been in no hurry to sell a soul for market rate. "What will you put here?" the woman asked. "Shelves," Binta said. "Chairs that don't judge backs. A place to learn without the performance." "Good," the woman said. "Performance is what made the neighborhood weird." They shook hands. Binta stood in the empty room and tried to hear it full of voices, kids out reading their own doubts, aunties hosting Saturday circles, a teenager discovering that a book can be a knife and a balm and a key. On her way out, she sent Josephine a photo of the sun on the scuffed floor and typed, "Yes." Then, as if the phone knew to balance the ledger, a different notification arrived. "Bank, account review complete, temporary holds extended. Please respond with..." She responded with documents. She responded with patience. You don't outshout a bank. You outlast it with paper. Adam spent the same 2 days making calls that didn't go the way calls used to go. Friends were busy. The PR team recommended strategic silence. A podcast host he had once rescued from a scheduling snafu texted, "Give it 2 weeks. People forget everything in 2 weeks." He didn't answer. He went for a walk that turned into a long one and realized around the 11th block he was walking toward a site he had cut the ribbon on years earlier, like a politician who loved scissors. The security guard at the gate didn't recognize him. Adam stood there longer than he should have. Then he did something nobody could have planned for him. He asked if the foreman was hiring. That's how he met Ramona. She wore a hard hat like a crown. Not because she was trying to, but because authority sits a certain way when you earn it. "Experience?" she asked, not looking up from a clipboard. "Development," he said. You mean on paper, she said. He smiled, sheepish. Also true. She finally looked up. You ever sling rebar, sweep a deck, haul drywall up 3 flights because the lift is down? No, he said. There was a version of him that would have lied. He didn't try on that version. Can you be on time? Yes. Can you take instruction without treating it like an insult? He met her eyes. I can. She studied him for 3 seconds longer than comfort allowed. Okay, she said, and pointed with her chin. See that guy in the neon vest? He's Luis. You belong to him for 2 weeks. You don't skip the line here. You visit it. Then we'll see. No still. He showed up at 6 the next morning, an hour early, because fear has a way of making good habits. He found a pair of gloves in a hardware store open before dawn and learned fast that nothing humbles like the weight of material. He learned where your back ends and your pride begins. He learned there's a language to the job that never makes it into glossy brochures, and that respect is measured in who grabs the other end of the board without being asked. On day 4, an older electrician got a comment from a subcontractor that wasn't just a joke. Adam watched the man laugh it off and watched a younger engineer shrink 2 inches. He moved without thinking. Not here, Adam said, stepping between them. We don't do that. Who are you? The subcontractor sneered. Someone who's learning to listen, Adam said, and someone who's not going to let you talk to her like that. Ramona saw the whole thing from 20 feet away. She didn't intervene. She clocked it. Later, she handed him a coffee that had been sitting on a toolbox. You keep that up, she said, and I might forget who you used to be. He didn't ask what she meant. He had Googled himself enough to know the internet doesn't move out of your house when you change the locks. While he hauled and swept and learned, Binta kept answering quietly phrased noise with quietly phrased facts. A vendor email arrived with an attachment that wasn't an invoice so much as a nudge, per our customary arrangement under Adam. Josephine replied with a line you could frame on a wall. Customary is not the same as contractual. Please cite the clause. They didn't cite the clause. A week later, the neutral statement had done what neutral statements do, calmed some hands and annoyed some others. A reporter still emailed questions with angles baked in. Binta ignored the angles and wrote back one line. We're pouring concrete into communities, not press cycles. You're welcome to visit a site when there's a floor to stand on. That afternoon, she visited the laundromat building with a small team, one librarian who had retired too early, one community organizer who could make a city permit line feel like a block party, and one teen intern who asked better questions than most executives. They measured the rooms, argued cheerfully about shelves, and taped painter's tape on the floor where a reading circle would go. Josephine called as Binta locked up. One more housekeeping, she said, a suite of contracts from a vendor named Calibra Construction, all signed under Adam, something about expedited payment for pre-development facilitation. Binta stopped walking. The word facilitation did the thing it always does when it tries to dress a bribe in a blazer. We'll need to read every page, she said. We will, Josephine said, and we'll say no to what we can't stand next to. Do it in writing, Binta said. No adjectives. No adjectives, Josephine agreed. Binta hung up and looked down the block at a city that had taught her 2 languages, how to speak softly and how to carry receipts. She thought of her mother's name on the fund. She thought of a reading room with a circle of chairs and a rule that everybody gets to finish their sentence. Her phone buzzed with a short text from Darnell. Croissants again? Or does victory taste like oatmeal? She smiled and typed back. Victory tastes like paperwork. Bring butter anyway. At the site, Adam sat on the edge of a low wall, a lunch he could name spread out next to him, an apple, a sandwich, water. Luis punched his shoulder with the easy affection of a man who values who shows up more than who shows off. You don't talk much about before, Luis said. I'm learning not to, Adam said. That's fine. We got enough before here. Luis nodded at the half-framed building, the way a body nods at an X-ray. Let's try an after that doesn't fall down. Adam took a bite, chewed, and looked at the skeleton of something that would keep the weather off someone's head someday. He didn't know it yet, but he was starting to like the kind of silence that comes from work instead of shame. By evening, the city exhaled into the kind of light that makes glass look honest. Binta stood at the penthouse windows and allowed herself a small thing, satisfaction without gloating. Not because everything was fixed, but because the pieces were finally on a table she owned, where hands couldn't rearrange them whenever she blinked. Her phone lit with an email. Subject, Outstanding Facilitation Fee Calibra. She opened it, read the language twice, and felt the room cool a degree. Not fear, focus. Okay, she said quietly to the photo of her mother, the one that always caught the last light. One more thing to clean. She forwarded the email to Josephine with 3 words: decline, explain why. Then she poured tea that she would actually drink this time and wrote a list of names for the reading room wall, women who had given her rooms to grow in when all she had to pay with was attention. On the bottom line, she wrote Adana and circled it once, like a promise you don't need to say out loud to keep. The doorbell rang. Darnell stood there with a paper bag and a grin. "Butter," he said, "and an article you won't read because you're busy, but I'm going to summarize it for you because that's the kind of neighbor I am." She laughed and stepped aside. "In this house," she said, "summaries are allowed." "In this house," Darnell said, putting the bag on the island, "we do croissants and clean exits, and we don't do adjectives we don't need." "Deal," she said, and meant it. The email from Calibra didn't even pretend to be shy. Subject: outstanding facilitation fee. Body: as customary under prior arrangements with MDC leadership, remit the expedited facilitation tranche within 5 business days to avoid project disruption. There were attachments templates that tried to look like contracts by leaning on the word customary as if it were a clause. Josephine printed them, spread them across the island like placemats, and started marking them up with a pencil that had a ridiculous pink eraser. "Customary," she said, crossing it out. "Translation: we did it this way when no one was looking." "Decline," Binta said. "Explain why." "I will calmly, legally, and with enough citations to make a judge cry," Josephine replied. They drafted the reply without adjectives. "Dear Calibra Construction, we do not pay facilitation fees. Please identify the specific contractual provision authorizing the demanded payment. Absent such provision, we will treat your notice as withdrawn." They CC'd MDC counsel. They CC'd the bank agent, who responded with their favorite sentence: "We appreciate your commitment to governance." Then the city did what cities do, moved on with its heart in a hurry. 2 mornings later, the laundromat landlord called before breakfast. "You should come," she said, voice clipped. Binta arrived to find the roll-up gate halfway up, the front glass cracked in a starburst where it had met something angry. Inside, the dust smelled like wet plaster. Red paint dripped across one wall in heavy letters that looked like someone had written with a fire extinguisher. "Respect the deal or pay." The police officer was young, polite, and already tired. He took notes, photographed the wall, and asked all the right questions in the tone of a man whose notebook had seen too many versions of the same day. "You have any enemies?" he asked, not quite meeting Binta's eyes as he looked at the paint. "I have boundaries," Binta said. He nodded like that counted. "We'll log it, increase patrol. If you can install a camera." "We will," Binta said. She didn't add, "and we'll install better locks on the kind of doors you can't kick with boots." Outside, the landlord stood with her arms folded, jaw set. "I don't like bullies," she said. "Me neither," Binta replied. "We'll clean it." "I'll help," the landlord said, and meant it. Back at the penthouse, Darnell had already texted, "I have baking soda, white vinegar, and a playlist titled, 'We Will Not Be Intimidated.'" He showed up in 10 minutes with supplies and a grin that had weathered worse storms. They scrubbed. The red came off in streaks that looked like somebody giving up. The teen intern arrived with a broom and a ferocity that made the dust retreat. By lunch, the wall was a ghost of its morning self. Binta snapped a photo and sent it to Josephine with the caption, "We're fine." Josephine didn't reply with comfort or outrage. She replied with a scanned letter already sent certified mail. "We have reported your prior demand to the appropriate authorities. Any further communications should be in writing and should cite lawful contractual obligations. No adjectives, no drama, the kind of letter that keeps you from moving fast when the other side wants you to stumble." Adam heard about the paint from a push alert he didn't intend to see. Community reading room vandalized, police investigating. The article was thin, and the comments were predictable. Half sympathy, half conspiracy. He put his phone face down and stared at the plywood sky of the floor he and Luis were sheathing. "You good?" Luis asked, without looking up. "Working on it," Adam said. Ramona walked by, clocked their faces, and paused the way good leaders do when something is off without making a scene. "Hydrate," she said, tossing Adam a bottle. He caught it, cracked the cap. "Ramona," he said carefully, "you ever deal with people who think you owe them just because you used to?" Ramona squinted into the sun. "You asking for a friend?" "I'm asking," Adam said. "Then here," she said, pointing at the half-built skeleton behind them. "This place permits suppliers, inspectors, the lady who owns the bakery next door. Every one of them could try to press an advantage. Respect is not the same as tribute. If somebody tries to collect with menace, we write it down, we call it out, we cut it off. She tilted her head. We? That's you now, right? Adam took a long drink. That's me now. You keep doing what you did the other day, she said, nodding at the memory of him stepping between a disrespect and its target. And I might even believe you. Calibra's answer to Josephine arrived like thunder pretending to be a memo. Their counsel wrote 3 pages that said almost nothing except customary in bigger fonts. They threatened delays. They threatened the kind of lawsuits that function like fog machines. Josephine wrote back with citations, links to statutes, and one line that did not raise its voice. We decline to pay. We welcome any suit and will move to strike. That afternoon, the bank put a hold on a tranche that had nothing to do with Calibra, but everything to do with nerves. Binta didn't flinch. She forwarded the hold to Josephine and, in a separate email, attached 5 PDFs. Audits she had been running like clockwork since before anyone knew she owned a fifth of the company. Then a third, then 2/5. In the evening, when the sky turned the color of unripe peaches, she stood at the penthouse window and let the tired find her feet. She was not a superhero. She was a woman with a filing system and a photo of her mother that caught the soft light. She turned to that photo now. I'm okay, she said. I'm tired, but I'm okay. The doorbell rang. Darnell, of course, with soup and the soft buzzing energy of people who care. I heard the news, he said, holding out a container the size of a small drum. I made enough for an army. We are an army, Binta said. Of 3. 4, Darnell said, nodding toward the ceiling like he was counting an ancestor. They ate in the kitchen, which had the good manners of a room that knows it's not the most important thing in a home. Soup led to quiet. Quiet led to the truth you only say when the day is finally done. I don't want to hate him, Binta said. You don't, Darnell replied gently. You want to be safe, which is another word for free. She held the spoon between her fingers and considered freedom. It had not felt like a fireworks finale. It had felt like a sequence of small clicks, locks changed, keys cataloged, letters sent, bank meetings completed without anyone raising their voice. Safety was less a parade than a calendar that made sense. Josephine called the next morning with her lawyer voice leveled at very direct. We're at a juncture, she said. Do we push law enforcement now or gather one more piece? What's the piece? Binta asked. Adams, Josephine said. I know. He made a mess. He also kept a file the way scared men do when they know they're playing with fire names, dates, the kind of receipts that make prosecutors sit up straighter. Binta was quiet for a beat. And, how do you know this? Because I asked my favorite question, Josephine said. What would I do if I were him? Then I asked 2 people who used to be him. Then I called a number I don't love calling, and a friend of a friend said there's a safety folder in a storage unit that bills itself as climate-controlled and has never once been asked about receipts for the climate. Binta looked at the photo of her mother. We meet him, she said slowly. But not here. Not here, Josephine agreed. My office, conference room, glass table, 2 pens. No improvisations. Not a reconciliation, Binta said. Not even a rehearsal, Josephine said. Just evidence. At the site, Adam's phone buzzed with a number he didn't recognize and did anyway. Mr. Marshall, Josephine said when he answered. This is Josephine Okafor. He went still where he stood, between a stack of drywall and a pallet of things that smelled like new beginnings. Miss Okafor. We need to talk, she said. Not about feelings, about paper. In this Tataman force, he round a goddess. He closed his eyes and saw the storage unit, the file labeled with a boring name he had chosen for exactly this reason. Boring keeps you alive. I have it, he said. I assumed, she said. Can you bring it to my office today at 3? He looked at Ramona across the slab. She was yelling, in the good way, to make sure a delivery didn't take out a corner someone needed to stand on tomorrow. I can. Don't make a copy on your way, Josephine said, the hint of a smile in it. Bring it straight. We'll make the copies you need when you're in the room. Okay, he said. And Adam, she paused, letting the name test its balance in her mouth. No grand gestures, no apologies. Evidence. Then you leave. He almost laughed. That's the plan. 3 o'clock. The conference room. Glass table. The skyline cut into perfect rectangles by the windows. A pitcher of water that looked more official than thirst ever does. Binta arrived first and took a chair that faced the door without inviting the door to make something of it. Josephine arranged legal pads and clicked the pen cap on, then off, then on again. When Adam walked in, he looked smaller, Not because he had shrunk, but because there are rooms that will not inflate you just because you want them to. He carried a banker's box the way people carry babies in old movies, careful, unsure, slightly overcompensating. "Thank you for coming," Josephine said, professional and cool as marble. Adam nodded at Binta without reaching for the rope that couples always try to pull when the room gets complicated. "Binta," he said. "Adam," she answered, even. He set the box on the table, opened it, and lifted out a folder that had been labeled by a man who hoped never to need it. MISC, vendor due diligence. Inside, emails printed at odd hours, wire instructions that had learned to speak in code, consulting agreements with scopes of work so vague they could have covered the moon. Josephine put on glasses and started reading as if the pages might try to run. "How did you get these?" she asked without looking up. "I forwarded them to myself," Adam said, "when I knew I might need a way out." "A way out or a way to weaponize?" Josephine asked calmly. He didn't flinch. "Both." Binta kept her hands on her lap. "There was paint on a wall," she said. "This is not a game." "I know," Adam said, "and I'm sorry." Josephine held up a hand. "We're not doing sorry," she said. "Not today. Today is chain of custody. Did you alter any documents?" "No." "Did you withhold any?" He hesitated exactly one heartbeat too long, then shook his head. "No." "Good," she said. "We'll scan. You'll sign a statement about where you got them and when. Then you will leave. We will not discuss feelings. We will not discuss the past. We will not discuss the future. We will talk to law enforcement." He took a breath that sounded like a man climbing out of a pool after staying under too long. "Okay." While the scanner hummed, the room was a study in restraint. Binta watched the skyline the way people watch their own breath when they're learning how to live in their own lungs again. "You're not going to ask me how I am," Adam said finally, not as a plea, but as a fact he needed to say aloud to understand it. "No," Binta said. "Not today." The last page slid through the scanner. Josephine stapled, labeled, and put the originals back into the box. She pushed a single sheet of paper toward Adam. "Statement," she said. "Red sign." He read. He signed. He stood, hands empty now. "Thank you," Binta said, and there was no sarcasm in it. He nodded, almost bowed, then remembered who he used to be and who he was trying to become, and simply left. When the door clicked closed, Josephine exhaled. "That was useful," she said, "and not a circus." "Good," Binta said. Josephine picked up the phone. "Detective Alvarez, please," she told the receptionist. Then to Binta, "Hand over the receiver. We move now." Quietly. Binta nodded. "Move." They gave the detective the folder the way you give a surgeon the right instrument at the right time. No speeches, no advice from amateurs, just paper. On her way home, Binta stopped by the laundromat. The wall looked like memory now. The landlord waved without putting down her crossword. A kid stood at the counter with a jar of quarters and the careful concentration of a person investing in clean shirts. "Soon," Binta said to the empty upstairs floor. "Chairs, shelves, stories." At the sight, Ramona handed Adam a checklist and a look. "You good?" she asked. "I did a thing," he said. "A good thing." "Keep doing it," she said. One day in a row, then another. The city turned its faces to the evening. Binta stood at the glass and let one small smile happen. Not victory, not yet. Progress. A file box lighter than when it arrived. A wall less red than dawn. A plan that had learned to breathe without apology. Her phone buzzed with a text from Josephine. "They're moving. You did well. Sleep." Binta typed back, "Sleep is an adjective. I will attempt the verb." Then she laughed to herself, because even in the middle of a fight, jokes help you remember the parts of you that never asked permission to exist. Tomorrow would bring more letters, more calls, maybe more paint. But tonight, she had a city to watch, a mother's name on a fund, and the quiet relief of knowing she had chosen preparation over performance and care over chaos. She turned off the kitchen light. The room exhaled, and somewhere across town, a scanner cooled, a detective stirred, and a man with tired hands set an alarm for 5 a.m. Because redemption, like concrete, sets best when you show up before the heat. Detective Alvarez didn't waste anyone's time. He arrived at Josephine's office at 9 sharp with a canvas satchel and the kind of face that had practiced neutrality so long it looked like kindness. He shook hands, set the satchel on the table, and spoke in sentences that could stand up in court. "We verified headers on the emails," he said, tapping a stack. "We traced wire instructions to accounts we already watch for unrelated matters. The consulting contracts are either copy-paste jobs or drafted by someone who believes vagueness is camouflage. It isn't. Next steps? Josephine asked. Warrants, Alvarez said. Search and seizure on 2 offices and a storage unit. Quiet coordination with a bank and a carrier. It won't be a circus if we do it fast. Binta nodded. And safety? We'll assign a unit to pass your building more than usual, Alvarez said, but the safest thing here is speed. Do it, Binta said. They sign the things you sign when you're consenting to lend your evidence to a system that has to run on more than adrenaline. They agreed to terms, no press, no leaks, no performative threats in response to actual ones. Then Alvarez packed his satchel and left as quickly as he'd come, a man carrying the kind of work that prefers small doors. At noon, MDC's CFO called with a voice that had learned the art of not panicking on speakerphone. 2 updates, he said. The bank extended the hold on one line typical when their compliance unit smells smoke, and the vendor roster review turned up 6 facilitation cousins smaller, same DNA. Freeze them, Binta said. Rebid what's lawful. We won't function on folklore. Done, the CFO said, audibly relieved to have instructions that didn't require adjectives. Also, the compliance subcommittee wants to move an ethics policy from recommended to binding. It comes with training. Move it, Binta said. Every site, every supervisor. He hesitated. There'll be grumbling. Let them grumble, Binta replied. We're building houses, not excuses. She hung up and walked to the window. The city was honest in daylight. It always is. She sipped coffee that had cooled into honesty, too, and wrote 3 bullets on the legal pad Josephine left behind. Freeze folklore. Rebid clean. Train like we mean it. Across town, Adam folded a subpoena into 4ths and slid it carefully into the most boring notebook he owned. Ramona had handed it to him with the same tone she used for harness checks. Testify. Tell the truth. Don't chase a speech, she had said. And if they ask what you knew and when you knew it, try too late before you try not my department. He smiled despite himself. Yes, boss. I'm your foreman, she said, already turning away. And for the next 48 hours, I'm also your conscience. Hydrate. He did. He showed up to the DA's office in work boots that still smelled like dust, because that's what he had. He didn't rehearse the parts of his life that made him look better. He answered questions. He kept his eyes on the documents, not on the mirror a witness stand tries to become if you let it. When he left, he stood on the courthouse steps and breathed air that hadn't been refined by a press cycle. Back at the laundromat building, red paint had surrendered to primer. Shelves arrived in flat packs that required humble tools and a patience Binta was proud to find she still owned. The retired librarian Mina schooled the teen intern on the geometry of books. Spines out, pride in, she said, making both a shelving note and a life rule in one breath. The community organizer, Ray, hung a banner on painter's tape that read, Reading Room, soft open, in letters so warm they made the room brighter. A little boy, backpack heavy with whatever first graders keep in there, peered in through the door as if he were visiting a planet. Is it open? He asked. Softly, Binta said, smiling. Come test a chair. He sat, swung his feet, and ran a palm over the armrest like he could feel stories the way some people feel the weather. Is there a book about trains? There is always a book about trains, Mina said, and found one like a magician pulls silk from a sleeve. As the boy made tracks with his finger over pictures of tracks, Binta's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number that identified itself immediately with tone. Last warning, respect the deal. She didn't reply. She screenshot. She forwarded to Josephine and Alvarez. Subject line, making friends. Josephine wrote back 2 words, logged, proceeding. That night, the elevator in Binta's building stopped 2 floors below hers. The doors opened on a corridor too quiet for the hour. She stepped out and felt the back of her neck prick, the way it does when you realize you're not alone without having seen anyone. She listened, then walked to her door with the calm step you practice when you refuse to gift a threat, your fear. Inside, she double-checked the changed locks she had already checked 100 times, then set her phone on the counter and allowed her hands a tremor. It lasted 12 seconds. She counted every one. Then she texted Darnell. You home? He replied with a photo of a pot on the stove and the caption, yes, and the soup agrees. She slept. Morning broke with motion. Alvarez texted Josephine at 6:19, executing. At 6:54, Unit 1 secure. At 7:03, Unit 2 secure. At 7:18, storage got it. 3 messages. No adjectives. The day exhaled. By 10, someone on the internet had posted a shaky video of men in windbreakers carrying boxes down a narrow office hallway. The comments did what comments do, pretended to know everything and revealed they knew nothing. Binta didn't read them. She answered an email about shelf brackets. She confirmed a delivery of folding chairs. She sent a note to the board chair. Compliance policy to vote today. Please put it first on the agenda. He wrote back one word. First. News crawls caught up at noon. Construction magnate questioned in facilitation probe. The word question did the job real words do when lawyers stand in the room behind cameras, convey movement without promising where the road ends. Binta's phone lit with numbers she didn't answer. Josephine fielded reporters with a sentence that could have been tattooed. No comment while cooperation is ongoing. On the site, Ramona stood on a slab that would be somebody's kitchen someday and watched Adam tie off like a person who had learned the difference between careful and timid. She nodded once. Good, she said. Keep being boring. It's underrated. An hour later, Louise flagged Adam over to a column where 3 bolts didn't sit the way bolts are supposed to sit. Someone rushed, Louise said, low. Or someone wanted this to look rushed. They documented. They tightened. They called it in without turning it into a show. Ramona took photos and wrote a report so dry it crackled. Today's lesson, she told the crew at the tailgate meeting, is that we don't reward shortcuts with shrugs. In the afternoon, the MDC board met. First agenda item, adopt the ethics policy with teeth. It passed by a margin that looked like shame, learning how to vote. Second, terminate vendors who refuse to document their right to be paid. Third, authorize rebids on projects that had known too much rumor and too little math. Any objections? The chair asked. There were none that wanted their names recorded next to them. The bank called it 3 with a tone that had unclenched 2 fingers. Given the board actions and the, parallel developments, the agent said, we can partial lift 1 hold while the rest of our process completes. We appreciate your caution, Binta said, not lying. Send the revised schedule. She forwarded the change to Josephine and the CFO with 3 words, daylight, use it. Then she turned off email for an hour because a room full of new shelves deserved a person fully present to arrange them. At 4:30, a white van idled too long across the street from the laundromat. Ray noticed it, because Ray notices everything in a 6-block radius. She walked out with a roll of tape like that could fix anything and everything. The van slid away. Binta logged the plate and texted it to Alvarez with no storyline attached. He replied, thanks, logged. At 5, the soft open became a softer evening. A small circle formed Mina, Ray, the first grader with trains now holding court, 2 aunties who measured stories by whether their shoulders dropped as they listened, and Darnell, who read a paragraph about a woman who bought a home with cash because she had learned what rent does to fragile souls. 2 on the nose, Ray teased. On purpose, Darnell said, and everyone laughed. Binta's phone buzzed in her pocket with a message from Josephine that read like the end of a long inhale. Arrests made. Multiple counts. No media from us. She closed her eyes for half a second. She didn't pump a fist. She didn't whisper a toast to victory. She looked at the little boy sounding out locomotive and let relief sit down without needing applause. Across town, Adam ended a long day with hands that had earned their fatigue. He checked his phone and saw the same alert the rest of the city. Saw no names at first, then too many. Calibra, Associates, a map of arrows connecting offices to shell companies to people whose cards claimed titles that evaporated in strong light. He didn't text Binta. He didn't know if that would ever be appropriate again. He did text Ramona, thanks for the conscience. She replied with the digital equivalent of a grunt, tomorrow, 6 a.m., bring your spine. That night, the penthouse felt like a sanctuary and not a fortress. Binta stood by the window, phone face down, city spread out like a ledger that had decided to be honest for a few pages. Josephine called, voice gentler than usual. They'll arraign tomorrow, she said. We won't go. We're not props. Paper will do our talking. Good, Binta said. How's your bun? Josephine exhaled something like a laugh. Undefeated. Then rest it, Binta said. Tomorrow we train supervisors. About that, Josephine said. HR asked me if we know any ex-executives who can talk credibly about what respect looks like when you're the one who used to get away with not giving it. Binta was quiet for 2 beats that could have been an ocean or a breath. We do, she said. But we don't invite him as a spectacle. We invite him as labor. Understood, Josephine said. No testimonials. A syllabus. The next morning, Adam stood in front of 20 supervisors in a windowless room with bad coffee and better intentions. He didn't introduce himself with a resume. he said. Here's what I did wrong, and listed behaviors the way you list screws you should have tightened. He talked about how power distorts hearing. He talked about how jokes travel like bruises. He talked about Luis and the engineer, and the way a site can decide to be a place where the smallest person doesn't have to shrink. No one clapped. They nodded, which matters more. After, in the hallway, he found Binta walking toward him with Josephine at her shoulder. He stepped aside as if to make room for two people who were moving faster than he deserved to ask them to slow. Good session, Binta said. Not praise. Inventory. Thank you for the work, Josephine added, arms full of binders labeled without poetry. Policy, training, roster. Adam nodded. If you need more sessions, We do, Josephine said. We'll schedule through Ramona. And it's like forgiveness. Okay, he said. Binta didn't offer a smile. She offered a boundary that felt like mercy. Take care, she said, and kept moving. Outside, the sky had the high, clear blue of accountability days. News trucks idled where the courthouse steps granted them their favorite angle. Alvarez walked past them with the practiced indifference of a man who knew where the real work lived. Paperwork, interviews, signatures, custody logs, none of it made for good television. All of it mattered. At the laundromat, Ray stapled a printed flyer next to the reading room door. Saturday Circle, bring a poem your grandmother liked. Mina arranged a display titled Maps and Homes Novels, Memoirs, a slim book of essays that said housing policy without saying housing policy. The train kid returned with his mother, who looked like the day had tried to take more than it should, and she hadn't let it. Do we need a library card? The boy asked. You need to promise to bring the book back, Mina said. I promise, he said solemnly, the way kids promise when they're being initiated into something sacred. By dusk, the city's temperature dropped 2 degrees, and its heart climbed 3. Binta stood in the doorway and watched people choose chairs. The phone in her pocket stayed quiet, as if it knew the room required a different kind of attention than alerts could give. She thought about the first night, the dinner, the laughter, the sentence that had cut clean, "We're not together anymore." She thought about how endings can be precise tools if you use them right. She thought about her mother's name on the fund, and on her life, and on the wall she would hang across the back of this room, where kids would put their own names, not in chalk that can be wiped away, but in ink that says, I was here. I was allowed. When she finally went home, the penthouse caught her like an old friend. She made tea and actually drank it hot. The photo of Adana glowed in the last light. Binta spoke into the room like a person who trusts her walls to keep her words. We didn't win, she said softly. We did the work we were supposed to do today. The city blinked. The river of headlights kept moving. In a jail cell somewhere, a man who had written customary too many times stared at a ceiling that didn't care about his fonts. In a small apartment, Adam set his alarm for 5 a.m. and placed the subpoena copy in a drawer, not as a trophy but as a reminder. In a community room above a laundromat, a book about trains slept on a shelf like a promise that would be kept tomorrow. Tomorrow. Arraignments, policy votes recorded in minutes, vendor lists rewritten, bank schedules readjusted, a reading circle where somebody's grandmother's poem would land with the soft thud of truth. Tonight, quiet, tea, a skyline that looked less like a scoreboard and more like a neighborhood with the lights on. Arraignments make noise even when you don't. Josephine's text landed at 7 a.m. They'll bring them up at 10. No comment, no presence, paper only. Binta read it while unlocking the laundromat door and flipping the light for the upstairs room that was beginning to feel like a heart. She brewed a bad pot of coffee burnt on purpose. It kept visitors honest and lined up 6 folding chairs as if 6 could hold a city. Down at the courthouse, cameras learned gravity again. Calibra Construction founder arraigned on multiple counts. The crawl announced in a tone that tried to be bored and failed. The word customary made one last appearance in a defense statement and sounded, finally, like what it was. An admission that tradition is not the same as law. Alvarez walked past microphones with a folder and a face that said he'd keep working after headlines slept. Binta didn't watch. She taped a sign to the stairwell that said, Reading Room, now, open, quietly, and meant every word. Mina wheeled in a cart of books. Ray brought a box of markers. The teen intern arrived with a spreadsheet printed on paper, because sometimes paper reminds you you're real. Darnell shouldered through with a tray from the good bakery and a look that announced, croissants are policy. At 10:30, a mother in scrubs and a boy with a train book under his arm appeared in the doorway like an answer to a prayer nobody wanted to make performative. We brought it back, the boy said, solemn as a judge. You brought it forward, Mina corrected gently, shelving the book and pulling down another. Next stop, Bridges. Binta's phone buzzed. Josephine again. Held without bail on 2. Monitored release on 1. Next hearing set. We keep our mouths shut and our files open. Binta typed understood and pocketed the phone. At noon, the bank called. The agent's voice had upgraded from anxious to careful. Given today's developments and the board's policy actions, she said, we can fully lift the remaining holds, subject to routine monitoring. Monitoring is a comfort, Binta said. Send the letter. She forwarded it to the CFO with a note, time to move steel and ideas. Then she turned to Ray, who was sketching a schedule on butcher paper like a general laying out a campaign. After school hours, Saturday circle, poem nights, quiet mornings. The room absorbed it, as if rooms can decide to hold something beyond furniture. Across town, Adam finished a shift that had been mostly lifting and a little listening. He rinsed dust from his hands in a sink that was always one towel short of enough, checked his phone, and stared at the courthouse alert like a man looking at a map that finally named the roads he'd traveled without admitting it. He didn't text Binta. Boundaries had a way of making the right words more obvious by removing the wrong ones. He did text Ramona. I'm available for more sessions if you want them. She replied with appropriate theology. We always want labor. Friday, 3 p.m. That afternoon, Josephine convened a meeting with HR, compliance, and a calendar. We are not piloting this, she said, tapping the word training on a cover page. Pilots are how people pretend to prepare without changing anything. We schedule, we roll out, we measure. The HR director, a woman who had weathered 3 CEOs and 4 strategies, nodded. We'll start with supervisors. Sites first, office next. Same rules for everyone. And the outside sessions? Someone asked. Run through Ramona, Josephine said. No testimonials, no confessional theater, a syllabus, respect, reporting, retaliation prohibitions, bystander intervention. We're not asking anyone to emote. We're asking them to act right. Binta added one line, quiet and precise. Add a module on vendors. Respect is also refusing to launder the word customary. Done, Josephine said, and wrote it in a hand that would one day be quoted in a memo. By evening, a city council staffer emailed about a hearing on affordable units and the new ethics policy. The message was polite in the way professionals are when they are surprised by competence. Would Miss Gold care to testify? Josephine drafted a reply that declined the spotlight without refusing responsibility. We'll submit written comments. We prefer to let sites speak for themselves. The staffer responded with a smiley the city hadn't outlawed yet. 2 days later, Alvarez called. We'll need you to confirm chain of custody for a handful of documents, he said, voice even. We can do that, Josephine answered. Send a list. He cleared his throat. And, Miss Gold, if you prefer, I can assign an officer to do a walkthrough near your building evenings this week. Prefer, Binta said, not pretending bravery has to be loud to be real. The walkthrough happened without ceremony. A car idled longer. A pair of uniforms took the corner slower. The lobby staff noticed and went about their work with shoulders that set 2 inches lower into their sockets. No one wrote about it. Sometimes the right kinds of safety don't make press releases. On Saturday, the first circle proved its name. Aunties arrived with poems folded into purses like bills. The train kid recited a line about machinery like it was gospel. Mina read 2 stanzas that made a teenager stare at her shoes and then at the ceiling. Ray declared snacks essential and passed around a bowl of almonds that felt official. Binta didn't lead. She sat, hands open on her knees, and listened until the room taught her something she didn't know how to ask for, the feeling of a story landing without anyone needing to grade it. After, she wiped tables while Darnell swept in quiet strokes. You always knew you'd do this? He asked. I always knew I'd do something that didn't require applause to be true, she said. This is that. He nodded. Good. Sunday? I'm bringing cinnamon rolls. Put it in the policy. The following week turned into a calendar, the kind that makes anxiety surrender to structure. Board votes recorded, vendor lists cleaned, a compliance hotline staffed by a human who sounded like she actually wanted to hear from you. Ramona reported that 3 supervisors had tried to shrug at the training and discovered the curriculum does not grant extra credit for confidence. At the end of a session, Adam stood in a hallway where a poster promised no retaliation like a rule and finally believed it might be. When they crossed paths, Binta kept the interaction exactly where it belonged. Professional, brief, clear. Session 3 next week, Josephine said to Adam, glancing at a roster. Louise says you explain how to apologize without turning it into a performance. I'm learning to keep the words short, Adam said. Keep the labor long, Josephine replied, and moved on. Spring shifted with its usual arrogance toward summer. The bank's letter arrived on thick paper that tried to make caution look luxurious. The city council hearing took place and passed 2 amendments critics called expensive and Mina called humane. The vendor rebids came back cleaner and a hair higher. The CFO sent a note that read like a human being, "We'll make it back in disputes we don't have to settle." The market shrugged, then nodded, then forgot, as markets do. In the reading room, the wall at the back turned into a slow mural of names. No glitter, no cursive, just block letters in black marker that said, "I was here in 100 variations." On a Tuesday, Binta waited until the circle emptied, uncapped a pen, and wrote one name at waist height where small hands could trace it later. Adana. She circled it once. She didn't cry. She did sit for a minute with the kind of quiet that breaks you open and tucks you back together at the same time. Months became a year became 2, and then there were 3 of them stacked neatly like books, spined straight, pages worn, corners softened by being held. 3 years later, people clapped. Not in the reading room, in a hall that had chandeliers and a caterer who understood restraint. The award had a name long enough to make a headline. Binta stood on a stage she hadn't asked for and adjusted a microphone while Josephine sat in the second row with a bun that had defeated compared calendars. Ray wore a dress that said joy without whispering apology. Mina dabbed her eyes like an auntie who had earned the right, and Darnell recorded on a phone he'd finally learned to hold horizontally. The presenter read a paragraph about impact and innovation and community-forward development, and then Binta spoke with the smallest of smiles. "Thank you," she said. "I try not to confuse applause with accuracy, so I'll be brief." Light laughter, relief in the room. "We built units people can actually live in without paying with their souls," she said. "We built reading rooms where a 6-year-old learns that questions are not mischief. We built policies that assume respect isn't a personality trait, it's a practice. We didn't do this because we woke up righteous. We did it because we got tired of performance and decided to love outcomes." She paused, eyes steady. "I'm asked sometimes about forgiveness, about whether it means a return to what broke. Here's what I know. Forgiveness may unburden your heart, but it doesn't have to reopen your door. Boundaries are not anger, they're architecture." She let the sentence sit. You could feel the room adjust. "I learned that from a woman named Adana," she added softly, "and from a city that taught me to read the fine print on promises." She closed with the only benediction she believed in, a call to labor. If you have money, spend it carefully. If you have power, let it pass through you to somebody else. If you have a room, make a chair that doesn't judge backs. If you have a voice, say what you can stand next to. They clapped again. Not standing, not wild, just right. After, she stepped off stage and into a corridor where the carpet made everyone quieter. Adam waited there, not out of place but not exactly of the scene. He wore a suit that fit like a person who got measured after he stopped pretending. Ramona was beside him, straight-backed and unsentimental. "Congratulations," Adam said. No extension of the moment, no reach for what wasn't his. "Thank you," Binta said. "How's the training?" "Steady," he said. "We're adding a segment on vendor pressure." "Good," Josephine said, appearing with the gravitational pull of competence. "We'll give you the new flowchart." Ramona grinned. "We laminated it," she said. "We're not letting sweat ruin the rules." They shared a minute's worth of silence that wasn't awkward. Then Binta lifted her chin toward the exit. "I have a second speech to give," she said. "Where?" Adam asked before he remembered to make the question smaller. "Upstairs from a laundromat," she said. "Saturday circle got moved to Thursday this week because kids have a field day tomorrow." "Go," Josephine said. "We'll box your slice." It forth 4 in 20 minaries. They left the hotel shimmer and returned to a room with scuffed floors that had learned to shine without polish. The circle was already in motion when Binta arrived. The train, kid, older now, voice lower, confidence higher, read a passage from a book about bridges, and waited for the room to decide what to do with it. Ray moderated like a conductor. Mina handed out Xeroxed poems. Darnell slipped in late with a thermos the size of an argument. After, a new mother hovered by the door with a baby and a look Binta recognized from a mirror she used to own. "Is this for us?" the mother asked, gesturing at shelves that had never looked richer. "It is," Binta said. "It always has been. So, see Cassie, friend." On the way home, dusk pinned itself to the river. The penthouse, hers, always hers, opened like a held breath. She placed the award on a shelf next to nothing because it didn't belong next to anything yet. She poured tea and drank it hot. The photo of Adana took the last light and turned it into permission. Her phone buzzed with a text from Alvarez, who never forgot to tidy his cases. Final sentencing. No appeals left that matter. Thought you'd like the closure. She typed back, thank you for the work without adjectives. Then she texted Josephine, tomorrow, policy audit. Don't let me enjoy trophies too long. Josephine replied with a photo of her bun and the caption, undefeated, 9 a.m. sharp. She stood by the window and looked at a city that had taught her to breath in 4s and exhale in 6s, to send letters before speeches, to change locks and laws, to replace customary with contract, to replace ownership with care. She thought about the dinner, about the sentence she had said calmly and meant completely, about the door that had stayed closed and the rooms that had opened because of it. She whispered a sentence into the quiet that sounded like a summary and a start. We didn't win, we built. In the morning, there would be emails and a site walk and a circle where someone would bring a poem about a kitchen table. There would be training and a union chat and a bank report and a child who'd found a book that felt like a key. There would be croissants because Darnell insisted policy demanded them. There would be work, and there would be a wall at the back of a room, names in black marker, one of them circled, all of them true.